Okay, we're good. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another think tank session. This is Gray, and he will take it away from here.
Hey everybody, I'm Gray. You probably don't know that because I don't have an overlay yet, but Laura's working on that.
There we go. We're good.
Excellent. I'm Gray. I work at Thankful with Laura. We're back for our weekly session extravaganza. We are here today to talk about startups and working in the startup world. We're here with some pretty awesome people, only some of whom work here this time. And today we're just going to talk about like their work, what attracted them to working in startups, what they like about it, what they hate about it, why you should never ever work in a startup. Oh wait, no, why you should. Hey everybody, I'm Gray. You probably don't know that because I don't have an overlay yet. But
is someone playing the video?
I'm Gray. I'm Thankful with Laura.
Who's watching
We're
in the
back for
background?
our weekly.
Oh, that may have been me. Okay, my fault. Totally on me, guys. Technical error. No, so yeah, Gray was saying, what brought you over to the dark side, and how you got into the startup world, and yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Gray. I do education operations here.
I am all over the communities over here at Thankful.
So Allie, you are on my left, so I'm going to pick on you first. Can you just tell us like who you are, where you work, and what you do there?
Yeah, I'm Allie Greer. I am in San Francisco right now. I work for a company called Scoop It. You've probably all heard of it because it's amazing. And it is a content curation platform that allows small businesses as well as larger enterprises to share content and information on their websites, on their blogs, with their consumers as well as internally with each other. I'm the director of community and content, so I head up our marketing efforts, community management, and social media and support as well.
Yeah, very cool. Brian, who are you and what are you doing here? But first, unmute yourself.
Yeah, it wouldn't give me the overlay. So I'm Brian. I work for Thinkful. Some of you may have heard of us. I've been in 3 different startups over the last 6 years, originally starting one myself, and in that time I've worked mostly in a product role focusing on learning, making it more effective, engaging, efficient, and that's what I'm doing now, Thinkful.
Yep, very cool. Jason, what's going on? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, I'm Jason. Sorry, I was trying to modify my lower third on the fly there. I am in Philadelphia right now. I work for an education technology company called ApprenNet. It is basically a video-based peer evaluation tool. And I am a Ruby on Rails developer, and I've been there for a little over a year.
Cool. Krista, say hi and tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Hi, I'm Krista, and I am the social media manager and head of content at Ship, and we are an on-demand shipping company. We launched in San Francisco in March, and we are headed to New York this fall. So it's pretty much the easiest way to ship anything anywhere if you're in San Francisco and then soon to be New York.
Guys, that's a massive understatement. They like pick up your package and will pack it for you and send it out. Like I can't rave about it enough. Yeah. I've been pestering her for
cool. And Vishal, I pick on you last.
Next bobbing head away.
Hey, I'm Vishal. I work on growth and technical recruiting at Upstart. We are a company that is reinventing the way a loan works. We're using data to underwrite credit beyond just a credit score. So, you know, what school you went to, what your employment history says about you. And essentially we're trying to make it so that younger people can get loans without being hit with really terrible interest rates that they don't deserve.
Very cool. So thank you everybody for saying hi. The first question that we'll start with is just why? Why startups? What attracted you to this rather than something with a more stable paycheck and less demanding schedule? Why startups? And I guess Krista, I'm gonna start with you.
How masochistic are you, and how much do you love it?
Yeah. Well, so okay, I haven't always worked at startups. I worked at an animal hospital right after college, and I loved that job, but I didn't see it being my career. So a couple years ago, I just decided to move to San Francisco because I had never been here before. And I ended up working at a tech startup that did pedestrian and vehicle traffic analytics. And after that, I was like, I want to get even more on the ground level and work for a smaller startup. So I went from a team of about a dozen people to being the 5th employee at Ship. And I think the thing that really draws me to startup life is it's super fast-paced. You have everybody is working really hard because the company's success day to day is based on the efforts of the people working there. And then also that you have a lot of freedom, like kind of creating like what it is that your role is, instead of saying, hey, it's your first day, here's your manual of everything that the person before you did, now just do that, be, you know, a cog in the wheel or whatever. That's not enough for me. So it was really like the idea that you get to like make your own space and create so much on a daily basis that led me to the startup life.
Yeah, way cool. Jason, so you finished school recently. I can't remember if you worked in a more corporate setting beforehand, but what led you to decide to kind of head this route?
Yeah, so it's been sort of a weird journey for me. I actually started out in like film and television, did that for a while, and then kind of circled back into education and did. I worked at a couple of universities, and a lot of the same things that Krista said that appealed to me about the startup world was when I was working at the university, I didn't feel challenged at all, and I felt like my career trajectory had sort of shifted, and I wasn't as interested in that anymore. And I wanted more. I wanted to be challenged, and I wanted more opportunities in the web dev space. So it was sort of an accident that I fell into the company, the startup that I work for. But is definitely a lot more challenging, and a lot like what Krista said. It's like making up what you do on a day-to-day basis, and what you do really matters. So it's really appealed to me, and I've really been enjoying it.
Cool. Ali, do you find yourself kind of defining your role day to day, or did you walk in and have a fairly set list of requirements?
Actually, yeah, it's very much the former. When I first got hired, I was actually an intern at Scoopit a couple of years ago when they first launched their private beta, and they kind of took a chance on me and hired me as soon as I graduated college full time. With absolutely no experience, nothing at all, and basically they were just like, hey, like we need somebody to do support, so sure, why not? And and now 2 years later, I'm the director of marketing. So I mean, it's definitely evolved a lot, and like every single day, I kind of decide like, oh wow, I can also do that. What do you guys think about that? And they're like, wow, yeah, that's awesome. So why don't you do that too? And like ever since the beginning, like I can kind of decide like how involved I want to be, and I think that's a really cool part of working at a startup is like I decided that I really did want to like put a lot of effort into our blog and our content marketing, and they were like, yeah, that's awesome, and it's really cool to like kind of surprise like your coworkers with what you're capable of, and like it's like I've been free to kind of explore what I can do and what I can't do and kind of run with that, and I think that's really unique to working at a startup.
Okay, cool. Vishal, so when you were considering Upstart, were you also considering kind of more traditional workplaces?
Yeah, so I joined Upstart directly after graduating, and the choice for me was between this and a career in management consulting, at least to start out. And the principle that I used to make my decision was, am I willing to trade my time right now for money and learning, or do I want to go straight to doing something that I actually care about doing? And so ultimately for me, it became a pretty easy decision when I realized that I never wanted to postpone doing something I actually cared about. And at startups, people are actually making an impact on the direction of a company that determines whether or not this product is successful in the world. Whereas if you're one small part of the big company, you can make a big impact, but you're not going to be one of the single people determining whether this product makes it into the world or not.
Yeah, very cool. So Brian, I imagine, so you've been in startups for 6 years now, which is a while, but you're old. So did you have
I'm an old man.
experience in a more corporate setting before this?
No. Previously to this, I was a teacher in a classroom, and then I worked as a researcher at the University of Columbia here in the city. Um, so my entrance to the startup world was mostly accidental. I had an idea for a learning app that was sort of based around some of the things that I was working on and researching, and I was fortunate enough to have a friend who built it, and we posted it on Hacker News to see what other people thought, and it sort of became super popular. And then over the next, I would say, 6 to 9 months, I became a founder and was in Techstars. And so I basically fell into startup life more than was actively seeking it out. But since then, I can't imagine myself doing anything else. Just the scale of impact that you can have and potential upside, I think, are worth it. And also, there's a lot of freedom and flexibility in terms of following your own interests. I couldn't be working on the things that I'm working on now, probably, and definitely not in academia or any sort of corporate setting, and especially not with the amount of freedom and leeway that I have at a startup. I can, if I start to become interested in a certain product, it's only 1 or 2 people that I have to pitch in order to start doing that here at Thinkful. And at my own startup, it was just me, and I could start exploring it on my own. So that was sort of the draw for me. Anything else?
Yeah, very cool.
There might be a lag.
I totally agree with you guys. Creative license. Prior to Thinkful, I was working at a company called Hootsuite, and yeah, a little bit. We got you. But I'm a big fan of making your own job description and getting to really kind of tell people what it is that they need rather than having them tell you. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So along with that, I think stereotypically along with the autonomy goes a lot of responsibility. So Jason, would you say that you work like typical 9 to 5 hours right now?
I try to. If I let myself, I would work all hours of the night. And that's something that I really try to be. I actually find it harder to stop working than anything else, which is kind of flipped it around than all other jobs I've ever had before. So, but I find that it's important for me to find work-life balance and to try to keep that sort of 9 to 5 schedule. The great thing about the sort of schedule that we have right now is we work together 2 days a week and we work from home 3 days a week, and we found that works really, really well for us. It kind of lets us sort of work interrupted when we're actually working on code things, but also the days where we work together, we don't feel pressure to get a lot of stuff done, because that's our dedicated, we're going to have meetings, we're going to talk about stuff time, and it really works well for us to sort of have concentrated work together time. But that's been really nice because that makes our schedule very, very flexible. So I do try to work a 9 to 5, but that's because I force myself to work a 9 to 5.
Yeah, Vishal, I imagine if I had to guess, I would say you probably struggle with the work-life balance. Is that
I'd say so. When somebody says they want to work at a startup, that could mean a million different things. I mean, is it a 10-person startup, a 50-person startup, and what is the makeup of that startup and the culture of it? So at Upstart, it's actually an interesting mix of, half of the team is a little bit older, sort of, they have families that they go home to at night, and then the other half are sort of, much younger, very much just starting their careers and very hungry to stay in the office till late hours. And ultimately, it is a struggle, but I think a good way to find a work-life balance is to make the things you do outside of work kind of supplement what you're doing at your job. So, for example, taking a class at Thinkful was something I did for 3 months, and while it's not directly relevant to what I'm doing day to day at my job, it very well could be once I have that skill set. So, I think the way for me that I create work-life balance is by making sure that my work is something that I care enough about to focus my entire energy on, and that things I do outside of that also kind of play into a similar story, rather than trying to live 2 different lives within very limited hours in a day.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, Krista, it sounds like you kind of very deliberately decided to join the startup world. Do you have any tips for folks who might be interested in doing that, like how to go about getting an introduction to this community?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is based on just like what you're willing to do on your own. So are you willing to go to a lot of meetups? Are you willing to learn things? Are you going to educate yourself? Because you're not going to have somebody holding your hand there. If you're lucky enough to get into a startup where you do have a mentor there, somebody who's going to say like, hey, this is my job and here's how I'm going to, show you these skills and whatnot, that's wonderful, but that's so incredibly rare. It really comes down to like just being a self-starter, and if you're not ready for somebody saying here's everything that you got to do, now go ahead and do it, and if you're not willing to accept feedback, negative and positive, then maybe spend a couple years working on something a little bit more established until you feel really comfortable just jumping in.
Mm-hmm. So, Ali, you leapt right in. You didn't follow that advice. It sounds like in undergrad you had an internship and then you followed that up. When you were looking around at internship opportunities, was there anything that you did well for other people kind of interested in this space?
I actually, probably my answer to that is like the worst answer ever, because I kind of got my internship with Scoopit by accident. um, I was a junior in college and I studied marketing in French. And the previous summer I had lived in France and studied French, and I just wanted to study abroad again. So I found a program that like hooks American students up with abroad internships, and I kind of just told them I wanted to go to Paris, and they were like, oh, there's this really cool startup out there, and I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, like I just want to live in Paris. And I didn't even know that like startups were even a thing at that point. Like I had no idea. I was still in college. I was studying at Penn State Smeagol College of Business, like very traditional marketing education. I had no idea that this whole world existed, and I kind of was just like, it just kind of fell into my lap. And after that, like I think that's why they did end up hiring me fresh out of college, is because I like did have that experience, and I found now I literally don't know any other work experience. Like I don't know anything else besides the startup world. So I don't know. I sorry, that's like not a really good answer, but
what kind of resources did you use, and like how did you kind of figure out how to acclimate yourself into startup world, because you kind of just stumbled into it?
yeah. Well, when I first started working at Scoopit, I was just like, wow, holy cow, there's like really like a lot of tech companies, and like this whole like startup life thing is like a thing. And so basically I just started like using social media to kind of follow people who were already in that world, and kind of just like start getting really jealous of their lives and like see what they were doing. But I use social media to my advantage by finding other people who are in similar positions to myself at other companies who maybe were a little bit more experienced, like Laura, for example, and like other, community managers and stuff like that. And I kind of still to this day, like I still like, I joke that like I have no idea what I do or like what I want to do when I grow up or whatever, but like I'm constantly trying to like figure out how to advance in this space, and like I really don't know the answer, and I don't know like what my path is going to be, but I think it's been working out for me so far, just trying to like really connect with other people in similar situations and kind of go from there.
Cool.
I think the cool thing about being in a startup is everyone's kind of figuring it out as they go. It becomes a little bit.
Exactly. And like most people in my position, like we're all trying to figure it out. It's like a new thing. It's not something they teach in college. Like I said, like I didn't even know it existed until I got here. So I think it's cool to kind of like have that connection with people and be able to, work for people who understand that that's the way it works.
Yeah. So Brian, let me ask you. So you started here recently. You came in, and we were like, okay, make Thinkful better. I think that's about as much direction as we gave you at the time.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people kind of dealing with ambiguity like that, and how to tackle like really complex, ambiguous responsibility in a situation like that?
Um, That's a good question. The way I approached it was I started to by breaking down the different parts of the business. So I looked at it from the perspective of curriculum, the students themselves, community, um, and the student mentor interactions. And then I started going to all the people who were essentially in charge of those things and had them give me a brain dump. Um, what are you doing? What's working? What's not working? Where are your frustration points? And I just started taking notes. The 2 weeks before I started, I did a series of calls with some of our mentors and then also like a handful of students. And then I sort of have a couple rules for when I join a startup, but one of them is that I'm a user of the startup myself. I think that there's no better guide to finding what you need to do than your own personal pain points. And so, a good place for me to start was, well, these are the things that are annoying me about Thinkful as a student. And I think it's also, from that perspective, that was basically the overall guidance. But I did sit down with Dan and Daryl and say, hey, what are my end deliverables? Like, what is a success criteria? And I think that's a really important conversation for any new hire to have with a boss, is basically to sit down and say, what is at the end of 3, 6, and 6 months, what would be a successful 3 years? Like, what would be success in your eyes?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just you're going to spend weeks and weeks figuring that out.
We had a question come in on Google Plus, which is a really good question, which was, is salary a major trade-off if you kind of decide to do this work? And I think the answer is generally yes. Certainly for me, that was the case. And we don't have to get into
Okay, Gray came from a lawyer background, though, so let's just put a little disclaimer on it that most people don't have that much of a trade-off. But there is definitely a line between what you're deciding. There are some awesome perks that you have at a startup, but you're taking a gamble, and what you're doing is you hopefully have some, kind of vested interest and some stock options, as well as what you're doing. And you kind of, like Brian was saying, you're being tasked with, you figure out what the challenge is and what the goal is, and then you're the one who's trying to figure out how to get there. But how have you felt, Greg? How did you feel about taking that?
It was the right decision for me at the time. Cash compensation is important, but so is autonomy, and so is ownership in what you're doing. And I valued autonomy and ownership as much as or more than the difference in salary, even though it was a big difference in salary for me. Vishal, I imagine kind of your two options: management consulting, right? Fairly lucrative, a lot of salary kind of upside there. Was that like an explicit decision that you made when you were kind of thinking about that?
So I actually turned down the offer at the consulting firm before I knew I was going to work with Upstart, and the decision came down to this. I think a well-funded startup should pay its employees enough to, live comfortably and not worry too much about money. But ultimately, you're making a trade-off between equity and, a larger paycheck at a more stable company. But there's two approaches to financial success or other kinds of success. One is a linear approach where you just collect money and put it in a savings account or investment account and watch it grow steadily over time. The other is you go for the big wins. And I think joining a startup is very much going for the big wins, not just in a financial sense, but also in a career sense. Because what do you get when you're working alongside a very small team of very, very talented people? Besides, potential financial upside, you get a ton of experience. You learn how to run a company from the ground up. Whereas if you're, sort of an entry-level person at a very big company, you just don't get that level of learning. And the responsibility you get, the things you learn, ultimately, I would argue, are going to get you a job at Google or wherever else you want to work if you really want to, but they also position you to go for that big win. So in my mind, it's not really a trade-off in the long term. It's actually a good bet.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the notion generally in startups is that your salary is going to let you live comfortably, and not be the kind of primary motivator for you doing what you're doing.
Definitely. I mean, when I started at Hootsuite, we were less than 100 people, and now we've got 500 plus, and hopefully my options are still going strong. Like, I think that it's working out. I think that, to Brian's point, you've got to kind of go for something that you believe in, and you can't evangelize it and care about it yourself, then you're going to have a hard time.
I do want to hop in one other note on that subject, though. So I do also work on technical recruiting at Upstart. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the platform hired.com. It's a recruiting platform where you essentially bid on developers. And one interesting thing I've noticed is that although there is going to be sort of a pay cut oftentimes at a startup versus a bigger company, there's also a very strong anchoring effect where if you think of yourself as someone who's not going to earn a lot of money when you enter the startup, you're much more likely to get kind of shafted on that deal. But there's a huge effect of what you state as your minimum on hired very strongly influences your actual outcome in terms of salary, regardless of what your skill set is. So I guess what I would say is when you're talking to a startup about potentially working with them, you do need to be aggressive about what your true worth is and not let, we're a startup so we can't pay that much, be enough to, let them kind of give you an underhanded deal.
Yeah, and negotiating
Yeah,
part of it. Brian, go ahead.
I actually agree with him. I'd like to add something on that. You're not joining a startup for the salary. You're doing it mostly because you enjoy the work and the lifestyle that comes with it. That said, it shouldn't stop you from negotiating. Some startups are very well funded, and if you can get the leverage to give yourself a better salary, then you should, take that opportunity. So I don't think the maxim that if you work at a startup you're not going to make any money is almost always true, especially if you have an in-demand skill set. Like a back-end engineer, Thinkful's hiring.
Indeed we are. Jason, so you kind of networked your way into your current position, intentionally or not. Do you have any advice for somebody about networking or about kind of resources to get into startups if it's something that they're interested in?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me was putting myself out there and putting myself in situations where I would run into people who were looking for someone with my skill set. I spent a little bit of time doing the job board thing and applying. Luckily, I was employed when I was looking, so it wasn't like a super aggressive job search. But so I just sort of hung back and was really looking for the right opportunity. And the one I found was not from the job board. It was from meeting these people at these events that I went to for fun, becoming friendly with them, and then later on finding out that they were looking with someone with my skill set. So, so I would say meetups in your area and anything that you're interested in, and either if it's tech or not, are really valuable. I've learned so much from that and met so many people. Found this job opportunity through those kinds of networking events, and I feel the next thing I do is probably going to come from one of those connections I made. So so really just putting yourself out there, being friendly with people. Took me a while to realize when you go to a meetup, nobody knows each other. So just introduce yourself to the closest person. That's not weird. That's what they're for. Yeah, so just going to events, meeting people, seeing what's going on, and just trying to push myself to do a lot of learning on my own, so I feel confident about my skill set when I got into it. So,
yeah.
Krista, was that the same experience for you? I know that you've been pretty well known in the startup world. Do you have someone who's a newbie trying to bounce around?
So when I joined MotionLoft, the company I was at before Ship, I got that through just a perfectly timed email. The CEO replied to me saying hey, thanks for applying for this job. Your email is on the top of 1,200 others, and so that's we just met in person, hit it off right away. That's how I ended up at MotionLoft. At Ship, I actually never applied. They reached out to me. One of their head of operations started following me on Twitter, and I was like, he doesn't seem creepy, so I followed him back, and then he was like, hey, can we talk? And I had in my Twitter bio at that time, I manage my own social media and I can manage yours too, something like that. And it kind of went from there because I was unemployed whenever I ended up working for Ship. So yeah, and then I also wanted to throw in something else about the question we were talking about earlier, with salary and equity. So my dad started working at a startup in 2001 in Raleigh-Durham, and I left for California with this dream of I'll work for a startup, similar to my software engineer dad, who's got way more experience than me. And he said that his only piece of advice he was going to give me was, you do not work for your stock options, you do not work for equity. He's like, that's nice to have, but you cannot rely on that because it's a crapshoot with startups. You have to have a paycheck that you're able to live off of, and you shouldn't be working for any company because you might hit gold. Like, that's not worth it. That's a cherry on top if it works out, the silver lining. But that's not what it's about when you work for a startup. You have to have so much more vested in that.
Yeah. I think that's great advice and probably a good spot to leave it. I see we're at maybe a little bit past our 30 minutes. So thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us today. Allie emphatically agrees on chat. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. This was a really fun conversation this week. To everybody else in the internet, see you next week.
It's been awesome as always. And by the way, I think we're 2 for 2 on actually being able to see both ferns now. If anyone else besides me is counting, just throwing that out there. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Really appreciate it. See you next week.